For now, we see in a mirror, dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. This is one of my favourite passages in all of Scripture, and I think in many ways it actually summarises the whole story of Scripture. There's a call back to Genesis and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is given as the reason for humans to find ourselves in the situation that we do in this world. I'll do another longer video on that another time. But there's also a call forward, because Paul says, then I will know fully. There's a hope and a future that is offered. And then there is something of the incarnation mentioned when he says, even as I have been fully known. And the Christian perception of the world is one that includes the fact that God, the Creator, condescended and incarnated and became a human being. And so all of this is present in this passage here. And I think that in many ways it is at the heart of some of the revolutionary ways of seeing the world that the Christian perspective offers us. The claim is that God is a God who is known by participation in a relationship. And on the surface, that might sound quite simple. And the beauty is that it is simple, but there are layers of depth to it that we could spend our whole lives looking at and not fully uncover. But I'm hoping in this video just to peel back some of those layers so that we can explore them together. God, the kind of knowledge that we come to know when we come to know God, is not the kind of knowledge that can be grasped as a possession, like a fact. It's much more a participatory kind of knowledge in a triune God who exists within a set of living relationships. Augustine spoke about God as the lover, the beloved, and love itself, or the binding force of love. And so, as human beings, the Christian story says that we are invited into this relationship of trust. And in this life, we get to experience a taste of that as we go on our journey towards eternity. In my last video, I looked at C.S. Lewis's Meditation in a Toolshed article and the difference between looking at a psychologist's view on love rather than lovers' view on love. The difference between looking at and looking along something or experiencing something. And I wanted to go a layer deeper with that thought through this verse that I read at the beginning of the video today, because both are necessary at points. Looking at something and studying it is necessary, but what is universally necessary is actually experiencing something. If you want to know something in a transformational sense, then the looking along is indispensable. And so what might be helpful for some people, or the right thing for some people to look at a particular thing, is not as universal as the second looking along a thing, if you really want to experience it. And what this is also not saying, the claim in this video, is that love is the opposite of knowledge. It's not a dichotomous claim of either this or that. It's an epistemological claim that love is the deepest form of knowing something. And again, what this doesn't mean is that knowledge collapses into feelings, or knowledge must be given up at the expense of the intellect. Because in every serious relationship, as the commitment and love deepen, the responsibility to reality also deepens further and further. My wife and I made a commitment to one another when we got married, and our love has grown and even developed over time, both in our relationship with one another, but also we now at this point have 2 children. And so our responsibility to the love and the covenant that we made to one another has grown in responsibility as well. And it's not that as we grow in relationship, our intellect goes further and further down. It grows further and further over time. You know, you might look into, as you have children, for example, you might look into parenting tips or methodologies. But that is something that is important and you do. But what is the predominant thing is that I now have a relationship with 2 human beings that did not exist before my wife and I were married, who now do. And I can now look at I can have a living relationship with these 2 beings, and I can see the world through their eyes in a new way. And so the things that I might need to learn in that relationship are important, but they are not the fundamental part of that relationship. And I think this is helpful when we think of our relationship with God, and how we might even come to fathom having a relationship with the creator of the universe. Because sometimes I think what people have heard in the church is, don't think it's all about relationship. And I can understand why people would have a problem with that. But I would say the problem isn't that faith is relational. It's that sometimes it hasn't been displayed to be relational enough, in the sense that the analogy I just gave with a commitment in a family, for example, because relationships demand coherence and truthfulness. That's at the fundamental part of, if a relationship is going to grow deeper and be sustained, those things need to come with time. This also is not an argument for relationship over knowledge, because some sort of Christian worry that, oh, if you look into things too much, you're going to find all of these contradictions and things that don't work out. So don't do that. Just focus on your relationship. It's saying that only looking at something in a kind of empirical way can only lead us so far. And we must recognize that experiencing the love is the key to knowing God. And that's why we can say things like, not every Christian needs to look at the nuts and bolts of their faith to be a faithful follower. However, that doesn't mean that some people aren't called and even should look into those things as well. But at the bottom of that well, you will not find absolute proof of God's existence. It's as if God has put enough of himself around us for us to legitimately have a belief in a God, but not enough where every person throughout history everywhere can say undoubtedly, yes, there is a God. And so there is a level of mystery that we need to step into in our pursuit of understanding. But the key part of this verse for me is when Paul says, I don't need to know everything because, and this is the key part, I know that I am fully known. So I have this belief that one day my questions will be answered. I will have answers to some of the deep longings of my heart that I can never quite get to. But until then, when I think back to the example of Jesus in his incarnation, his life, his death, and his resurrection, I choose to believe that I am fully known by God. And I think if watching this, that's enough for you to think, yeah, I do believe that there is a God that knows me, that somehow in the midst of this crazy world in which we live, there is someone who is looking down and sees all of it. Now, obviously, there are a load of questions that arise after that of, well, why does all the suffering happen in this life? And all of those kinds of things, which are huge topics and important ones. But let's just stop at that point for now. It's what Balthasar was talking about when he said, certainty is founded not on having grasped, but on having been grasped. And that sense of being touched by something of the divine is something that I think as humans we all long for. And so I'm hoping that through these videos I can hopefully give some sort of inspiration of the fact that as a follower of Jesus, I do think that I don't need to know everything, because I believe that I'm fully known. I believe that every human being is made in God's image, and that because we are made in that image, we have a responsibility to seek what relationship with the divine might look like. And in that process, we can come across the deepest form of knowing, which we get a taste of in the human interactions and relationships that we share with one another.